Hey guys, welcome back. We're actually going to get started with creating car paint shader for our rocket ship. So in the previous lesson I taught you guys how to organize your outliner, and now I'm going to teach you about the Hypershader. Now in previous tutorials we were clicking on the geometry, right mouse click and hold, and going to assign new material. Um, there's a window called the Hypershade, and that's found under Windows, Rendering Editor's Hypershade. Now, in the Hypershade, you might have a few extra windows open, maybe something like the Material Viewer, and you can always, place this guy anywhere on the side of Maya or in the Hypershade. So if I drag and drop it there, I can see it here. In my situation, I really don't care about that. Okay, I actually just deleted a shader, and that's the reason why it went green. So I'm just going to assign a basic Lambert back to this guy. So in our Hypershade, this is where we're going to organize our textures. So you have the materials, you have any textures that you've assigned to a particular object. So we have the mountain, and that mountain has particular files in there. Okay, so what we want to do is assign a new material to our rocket ship. So the material that I'm going to use is Arnold's new update version of their shaders, and it actually comes with lots of other shaders, but in particular a car paint shader. Now they do have a preset for the car paint, but it's a little bit different than the Arnold car paint shader. So let me show you what that looks like. If I click on shader, I click on AI standard surface shader, you can see that it pops up in our workspace, and it also shows in our standard surface. So if I click presets and go to car paint and replace, it changes a few attributes in here, and you could mess around with the color. If I go to presets and go to the car paint metallic and replace, it's going to change a few of the parameters in the specular and the base. Now if you don't have access to the internet, or just whatever the case is, you can't download the new updated version of the Arnold shader, and that's perfectly fine. You can change your car or your materials for your rocket ship through the basic AI standard surface. The other version, is the car paint. So under shader, AI car paint. If I click on it, you can see that it's totally laid out differently. We have specular, but what's different are the flakes, and I think you also have coat under this. So yeah, you have coat here as well. Okay, and the AI standard has thin film. It has like subsurface scattering, things like that. Whereas the car paint, it's kind of limited to just things that we need for car paint. So I'm going to delete our AI standard surface, and I'll actually show you where to download that particular object. So if I go to Google and type in download M2A 2.1, it's the first option, and you could choose the software you're using, Arnold for Maya, using a Mac right now, 2018, or Windows 2018. Okay, and you could see that Arnold has a rendering blog, and it shows you just some of the really cool things that you can get with the car paint, and the flakes in the sphere, and changing the color values, just really cool things. Okay, and I'm going to just show you on solid angles, standard surface page. You could see what a lot of the diffuse does, what the specular does to a particular object. So again, if you just want to use the Arnold AI standard surface, I would definitely recommend that you look through what each of the attributes do for that standard surface. So specularity, changing the roughness of a particular object. Okay, it explains lots of things that are going to benefit you. Okay, and for our final render, we're going to use an HDR image. So I would recommend that you go to HDR Labs. Okay, wonderful website. Go to Smart IVL. And under Smart IVL, we're going to click on the SIBL archive. And I'm using the Milky Way. All right, I'm using the Milky Way HDR image. And when you download that, okay, we're going to use that for our background. When you download the Milky Way image, it's going to come with lots of different images, okay? If I press spacebar, that's just a thumbnail. That's a larger image of it. It's actually a JPEG image. That's a blurred image. We want to use the small Milky Way _ small.hdr for our background image, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But for now, let's go back to assigning materials to this object. So I'm going to start off with this particular shape, the rocket shell, and I'm going to right mouse click on my AI car paint and click on the assign material to viewport selection, or you can middle mouse button hold, drag and drop. Okay. Now I like to just do one material at a time. I don't want to bog down my machine and have 8 different materials under are in my workspace. I like to keep it clean and just work with one at a time. So in order to see what this looks like, we have to open up the render view. Now I'll click Arnold render view, and it's completely black right now until I click on render and run IPR. Now because I don't have any lights in my scene, it's going to be black. So we need to click on Arnold, light, and we'll click on the sky dome light. And now we get our image. Okay. So this is an IPR, so it's always calculating, it's refreshing the image. So let's kind of explore a few of the car paint parameters. I'm going to minimize my Hypershade, and here's my render view. Okay. So right now the color is set to red. I'll keep the weight at 0.8. Specularity is everything is fine for now, but I really want to go over some of these paint, the flake options. So if I change, let's say, the flakes to Christmas colors, so let's make it green. You're going to realize that nothing happened right off the bat, okay? And that's because the density isn't increased, as well as the scale. So I'm going to increase the scale to something like 0.2 and the density to 0.2. And now you're going to see these really large flakes, right? It almost looks like camouflage. Okay? Now, if I change the density to 0.5, then it's going to be a larger flake. If I change the density to 0.01, you can see that there are smaller flakes. Alright, so let's change the scale back to like something like 0.2, and if I change the density from 0.2 to a larger value, you're going to see that it's kind of filling in the negative space. Alright, it's kind of filling in that negative space. So although I really do like how clustered they are, I kind of want them to be smaller. So what I can do is change the density to a lower value. Okay, so just a few, actually that looks about good. And then increase the size to a smaller value. I'll zoom in so you can see that. Okay. So it's all right. You know, I wouldn't use green off the bat, but it's a really good contrasting color on the red. object. Now the second thing that I really want to address is like how shiny this surface of this object is, right? This thing just went from outer space and it landed on this alien planet, and it's kind of shiny, and I really don't want the reflectivity and the shininess of this object to be um, so clean. So first thing I'm going to do is just kind of change the roughness of that surface. All right, and you can see that the entire screen is like refreshing. So to avoid having to wait for results, I'm going to click on this crop region and left mouse click and drag. And so now I can just focus on that section. Okay, so I'll change the roughness to maybe like 0.6. I can change the specular color if I wanted to. If you have an imagination like Disney or Pixar or just any of your favorite artists, sometimes you see that they do break the rules to make things look convincing. So let's break a few rules. Most people will use a specular color as white. You could use a specular color as, let's say, blue. And what you're going to notice is that, and it's really hard to see, but it's kind of like over here. Let me change the color of my object to, let's say, white. So maybe we could see the influence of the blue. Let's see. Maybe we'll make it a little less rough, so it's a bit more like shiny, like a brand new object, a brand new car. So you could see a little bit of that blue reflectivity here on our objects. Let's see if I could make it, let's do it red. Okay, so you can see that the reflection has tints of red. Okay, let's say we make our object from red to yellow. Light blue. I don't know, we can just mess around with that, right? So it's everything, it's not really set in stone. Actually, I kind of like that blue. It actually looks cool. Let me zoom out a little bit. My favorite football team colors are red and gold. 49ers, and I don't know, I've always liked the color red, and I like the color green. And it's that time of the year. It's December 20th, so I don't know, maybe we make it Christmassy colors. But I really do like this color. However, I don't know if it really fits in that environment. So let's make it a little bit darker blue. And maybe we'll change that flake size. Maybe I'll make red flakes. How's that going to look? So it's gonna go through the final pass. So I can make the density of our flake, make it scale a little bit. Let's try 0.002 for the scale. And I'm going to use that crop region area, okay? So I don't have to wait forever for a render. Okay. And let's try the scale a little bit like 0.05. Let's try 0.025. And I'll change the density to higher. And then you can do like layers, which kind of changes the, like some things are going to be a little bit lighter, some things will be a little bit darker than others. The flip-flop and the light facing color, I haven't really messed around with that. So let's see what those do. I always like to change the color just to see what happens. And maybe light facing color. Let's see, does it change when the camera's at a different angle? Doesn't really do that. Let's try green. About the flip-flop. Let's see if that's purple. So I can't see a major difference with like the flip-flop and a light facing color. If my flakes are going to be red, I probably don't want. Oh, okay, look, it's really cool. That's all right. I'm gonna change the flip-flop back to white and then light facing back to white because I didn't really see a huge difference. But as soon as I change the color of the specularity, right, let's see, that's white now. Right. That could be purple. Right. So this is actually what I was trying to show you guys earlier, just kind of breaking some of the rules. And I know it's going to be at nighttime, so maybe in outer space it's not going to reflect white from the sun, but maybe some of these cooler colors from outer space. And maybe I'll change the red to be a little bit like darker, and maybe increase it blue a little more, maybe a little less. I kind of want the flakes and the car paint not to be so much of a contrast. Okay, that actually looks pretty cool. Let me zoom out a little bit. It's really nice. Okay, so we could see some of the base color here. We could see the reflectivity and that kind of like purple reflecting off of it. I'm going to change how rough that surface is. Right now it's very shiny, so let me change the roughness to something like 0.5. Okay, I like that. Looks pretty nice. And I think I'm satisfied with that. Okay, so I'll move on to the next part of the rocket ship. Again, you can always play around with the different things. Oh, and then we also have coat. I don't want to skip over the coat. All right, so I'm trying to getting my camera angle to look like this. All right. The coat is set to white, so I always like to change the color and see. Okay, so that's dark purple. What if I make that coat red or dark gray? Then it's going to mute everything out. Let's just keep it at white and let's kind of change some things. So the coat, you could really roughen that surface. If I drag it all the way to the right, then it's a little more like weather worn. If I drag it to the left, so the weight gets smaller, then there's a little bit of a sheen, kind of a matte finish. So let me increase the weight to like point. What's like powdery. It's super shiny. Not as shiny, but I kind of like a certain level of reflectivity on there, and I think that's good. I'm happy with the way that looks. All right. And I'll rename this to shell underscore, actually R for rocket underscore shell. I'm definitely going to save the scene to lookdev underscore 01. And the next thing I want to tackle are the windows. So I'll select my window shape. I'll right mouse click and hold, go to assign new material, Arnold, AI standard surface, and that's our glass. Now, Arnold does have preset. So if you click on the presets, you go to, let's say, something like glass replace. It'll do that, but we can't see through the glass because of a few options that we need to change. Okay, so first thing that we need to do is, so we click on the geometry, and we want to click on the round glass shape in our attribute editor. Click on Arnold, and we want to turn off opaque. Okay, and second thing that we need to do is actually change our settings. So actually, we go inside of my rocket ship, and let's see if we can look out. So I can see outside of that window. Am I going to be able to look at the mountain? Which one looks at a mountain? I think this one does. So let me see if I can see through that shape. So it is kind of breaking that mountain shape up a lot. If I push 3, it will definitely help. Okay. But it's dark because there isn't any light being reflected through there. Okay, if you wanted to make this object, you know, not as shiny, but you wanted, let's say, to add like a certain roughness to that object. Again, I'm going to click on that crop region and highlight over that section there. Go back into our standard, and I'm going to call this round underscore glass. You can change the roughness of our specularity and drag that up, and you can see that now it's starting to look a little more like frosted glass. Okay, which I kind of think is a little more interesting than just the regular standard glass. Now I'm going to do something else to this. I'm going to give this very thin object thickness so that light can bounce through it. Because right now it's just a single surface, and I want to resemble realistic glass, so I'll press Control E. And you can see that it automatically does something different to that surface. So I'm going to look for my transform tool, and there it is. Okay. And the reason why it looks like black squares and then the white squares is because the faces are compressed. So I'm going to bring those faces out like that. And now it actually resembles glass texture, much more accurate than just a very thin object. Okay, so since this has a glass material to it, and we already renamed it, I'm going to assign a Lambert. So right mouse click and hold, assign existing material Lambert 1. And it's good that this object is gray, okay, because if it was black, then that means our normals are facing the wrong way. So if I go to mesh display reverse, then the normals are facing the wrong direction. And when we assign that right mouse click and hold, assign existing material round glass, you can see that the shape looks a little bit different, like the reflection off of the glass looks different. Okay, so if I Again, click on this object. We already know that the normals are facing the wrong direction. If I go to Mesh Display Reverse, then that's a little more accurate. Okay, so next material is going to be this shape. I'll press 3 so we can see what it's going to look in our final render. Right mouse click and hold, assign new material, Arnold, AI standard surface, and we're going to call this Chrome. I'll go to presets, Chrome, and then replace. And it looks white because of the way the light is reflecting off of it. But as soon as I change it like this, you could see that things change, the reflection. And I'm going to change my camera angle and expand that little window so that I'm looking at like the mountain. And if I change the metalness on the base, you can see that it will actually change the surface material. Alright, so metalness should always be at value of 1, maybe a little less. Okay. And if you wanted it to be like a brush metal, I think they have brush metal in here, replace. So you can see that the color for the base changes, the specularity changes on this object. Okay, so I'm going to go back to 100% chrome, and then I have these little rivets right here. I think these are our brush metal. So, and I'll hold shift, select the handrails, right mouse click and hold, assign new material, Arnold, AI standard surface, and I'll call this brushed metal. Go to presets, brushed metal, replace, and I'm pretty much going to be doing this for the entire project. When I get finished texturing it, again, we're just using Arnold's standard surfaces, and this is obviously not as standard as maybe like the presets, but it's still standard. I'm going to finish texturing this, and then I'll come back in a later tutorial and show you guys how to attach that HDR image to the sky dome and give ourselves a really, really nice final image with maybe some atmospheric effects and some depth of field. Okay, so I hope you guys like this. Please share, comment, and subscribe to my channel. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next tutorial.